Hi, George here. And today I thought I would spend this video talking about resizing images, stuff like that, really important things to know about, telling you about why things work the way they work so you really understand exactly what you need to do to get proper image resizing. But before I get into that, I do want to remind everybody that starting in September, all of my Photoshop Elements videos are going to be moving over to my HTG photo channel. I'll put a link for that in the description. I'm separating out my gaming stuff from my photo stuff. Already my Affinity Photo stuff is already over there, and my Photoshop stuff is over there. So starting in September, all of my photo stuff will be over on the HTG photo channel. So make sure you subscribe to that channel so you don't miss any of the videos coming up in the future. And then all the gaming stuff will be remaining here on HTG George. Okay, let's take a look at this. Now I have three things open. Big picture right here, smaller picture over here, and something in the background. Let's start off with that background. This is a standard 8.5 by 11 inch page right there, standard page size. I then opened up this image here, and this is just a nice photograph of this dog. This is at 300 dots per inch or pixels per inch, PPI. And over here, this is the exact same image, but at 72 PPI. Same size image, but different pixel resolution. Now, this looks like it's bigger than the image in the back, but it's actually not. And to spot that, take a look up here, right where it has a name for this window, 54.3%. That's the zoom on this picture. Up here, our background image, this has 27.4%. So these are at different zoom rates. So you can't really judge the size on the screen because the zoom is different. Now I can take this image over here and make it look like it's the same size. I'm just going to stretch this out like that. And I'll grab the magnifying glass. Let's just zoom in here on this. Back out one step. And it looks like it's pretty close to the same size. I can get even closer by using a little zoom control down here. And you would think that these are the same size images, but they're actually not. Now notice that this one is at 216% zoom, and this one over here is at 54.3% zoom. Now these floating windows in here, this is just one of my standard settings I like to use. If you don't have that, it's up here under the Edit menu. Come down to Preferences. First one here says General. And this is checkbox right here, allow floating documents in expert mode. I always have that checked, which lets me float my documents like this. Now, one thing I want to show you, it's a little hard to see maybe here, but hopefully not too hard. This is at 300 pixels per inch. This is at 72 pixels per inch. And take a look at the dog's face and the detail in here, especially right up around in here. Really easy to see right here on this one eye. And look over here at this eye. Notice how much more detail you have inside of this picture than you have over there. And that's because you have more pixels per inch, which means you can put in more detail. Let's talk about that just for a minute. First, I'll take these. I'm just going to drag this image in here, drop it on like that. Notice how even though this looks like it's the same size on the screen or even bigger, it's actually a smaller picture. We already talked about that. Let's just get this out of the way. I'm done with that picture now. Let's take this one. Again, looks like it's the same size on our screen. I'll drag this in. It's a lot smaller over here. So these are now all at the exact same zoom level because they're all inside the same image. So I now see the actual differences in size in here. So if you ever see this happening where you're bringing in one image like this and it comes in at a good size, you bring in your second image like I have over here and it comes in real small, take a look at the resolution of your image, your pixel dimensions. Now you can find that up here under Image, come down to Resize, look at image size, and then right down here where it says resolution, this is your pixel dimension. Now my paper size back here is 8.5 by 11 and it's at 300 pixels per inch. So that's the resolution for this overall image. So if I bring something in at only 72 pixels per inch, it's going to come in pretty small. If this happens to you, check your dimensions. We'll talk about how to change those here in just a minute. I want to, though, take a look at this and talk about the difference in resolution. This is why this one has more detail than this one did. Let me show you why that happens. I'll just zoom in on our picture. Here we'll go up to the eye again, and I'll keep on zooming in. It looks really nice, but as I zoom in further and further and further, you can see that this whole image is actually made up of little colored squares. Each one of these squares has just one color in it, one solid color. These are the actual pixels of the image. Now, when your image is 300 pixels per inch, that means you have 300 of these little squares going across to fill in 1 inch. So you can get 300 variations of color in there inside that 1 inch, which means you can put in a lot of detail. Okay, I'll use the Control 0 key here to go back to fit screen. Now, if this image over here is much smaller, is going to have far less detail because there are less pixels per inch. So if I zoom in again on the eye in here, you can see it begins to block up already before you even get into that fine detail. And that's because there aren't as many pixels to show the fine detail. Control 0 back to fit screen again. Now, a way to think about this, let me just hide that one for a minute. There we go. And I'm going to show a grid that I set up here. Show guides. There we go. Let's say this picture here is sitting right like that, and these are the pixels that make up this image. Obviously, the pixels are actually much, much smaller. But this gives you the basic idea. You know, at this size, there are this many pixels across and this many pixels tall. And here's where resizing comes in. If I want to make the size different, I can easily do that by grabbing a control handle here on the corner, drag it out, and the image is bigger. Or I can take that same control handle and make the image smaller, just like that right on the screen. Now, in most cases, when you're doing this on a picture, it's not going to make that big of a difference. Obviously, my real small picture I had, if I pulled that up to this size, we would begin to see a loss of detail because it's such a small image going to a much larger size. And the reason why that happens, you can see that right here. So I have right now this many pixels across. In this case, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Got to here, that makes it 16 across right there. So I have 16 pixels across to show this image. If I make this image half as big, I'll just pull it in like that. That's right about here. There we go. I only have half as many pixels to show the exact same information. Now, when you do this, obviously the picture looks the same, but as I pull it down in size, Photoshop Elements has fewer and fewer pixels to show the same information. So what happens as you reduce an image in size, Photoshop Elements has to delete pixels. It has to get rid of all these pixels over in here. It deletes all of that information, and it tries to do the best it can to fit it into the smaller size. And it does that by blending the pixels together side by side. So if we have a white pixel in here and a brown pixel there, it tries to blend this together. If this was just one pixel, it would give me a brown color between those two colors, between the white and that brown, filling in that particular area. So it tries to make up for those missing pixels by blending pixels together side to side. And what that does is it tends to blur your image down. Now, it has less of a noticeable effect when you reduce images than it does if you enlarge images. Let's say I took the same picture and I put it way up like this, make it a lot bigger. There are now a lot more squares going across side to side in here, which means that Photoshop Elements has to come in and add in more pixels. Now, as more pixels don't have any information, so what does Photoshop Elements do? It takes pixels side by side and then makes up a new one in between. It takes the colors from the side to side and then blends those together to get the middle color in here. Same problem again, because it's adding in new pixels that it didn't have before. It's going to tend to soften down your image, make it less sharp. So whenever you change an image size, smaller or larger, you're going to end up with a less focused, less sharp image. Now, there are some ways of getting around that. One, of course, the easiest one is just to keep in mind, if you do an image resize like I just did here, there's a good chance that you may want to come in and do a little bit of sharpening on that, just kind of fake it. What it actually does is Photoshop Elements goes in and increases the contrast between the pixels, and to our eye, it looks like it's sharper. It actually isn't. It just looks like it is. Let's just hide this grid in here now. Get that out of the way. So if I was going to enlarge this a lot like I just did, I would probably come back in, go up here to Enhance, and come down and adjust the sharpness just a little bit to help compensate for that slight image reduction in quality that we get. Now, this is worse when you do something like this. You just take your image, you just drag it in here and make it larger like that right on the page, because Photoshop Elements is going to be using their default setting for making your enlargement or your reduction, just kind of a standard general setting. And that may not be the best way to do that. You can do this better by going over here. I'm going to open up our original image in here, and that's our dog image right there. There's the original. You can see how, because I just changed that this actually is less sharp than this one is. We've lost some sharpness. Now, the best way to do this, if you know the size you're going to be going to, if you take your new image here, go up to Image, come down to Resize, Image Size. First thing, check your resolution. Make sure your resolution matches the resolution of what you're going to. In this case, back here, my 8.5x11 is at 300. I know that already. This is at 300, so that's fine. And since we're here, we can actually change the size of our image in here before bringing it into our image back there. Now, the reason why you want to do that, let's just say I wanted to have this at a width of 11 to fit that page back there. The reason why I would want to do that here in the image size dialog box instead of just dragging it back there, if I cared about the sharpness of the image, is because down below here, I can make a choice as to what way I wanted to have Photoshop Elements make that adjustment. It has bicubic smoother, best for enlargement, bicubic sharper, best for reduction, bicubic, best for smooth gradients, nearest neighbor preserves hard edges, good for graphic images, and bilinear. Now I tend to see that bicubic sharper is the one that Elements chooses all the time. Now you can use the sharper even though it says for reduction. You can still use that for enlargement if you want to. It depends upon your image really. Most of the time, just go for what it says here, best for enlargement or best for reduction. So I'll choose bicubic smoother, best for enlargement, and that's using a different system to make that adjustment to fill in those missing pixels. And it should give us a better image by doing it this way. Let's choose OK. Notice how we zoomed in, much bigger image here. I'll do Control-0 again to get that back to fit screen. And this is now at about the same size as that. It's actually a bit larger. And notice how my detail in the eye is much better over here than it is over here where I stretch the image to fit. So if you really care about sharpness and you know the size you need to go to, then coming in and changing the image size of your original before you bring it in is the way to go. That's going to retain as much image quality as possible because you can then tell Photoshop Elements how you want to have that image enlarged or how you want to have the image reduced, what system to use. So you're not using this, the generic one, but using a very good one. Also, one more thing that you can do here, on this image back here, I'm just going to float that right here, right now. This is just sitting on that page. If I come in here and grab my control handle and make an adjustment like this, it makes that adjustment. If I then pull it out here, there's our new adjustment. It's now readjusted this. And each time it does it, it bases it on the last position. Let's say it readjust here. That's my new position here. I'll pull it back out again here and choose OK. It readjusts it. And if you notice as I'm doing this, it's getting slowly a little more and more out of focus as I make these adjustments. If you do too many of these things, you're going to end up with an image that begins getting actually visibly blurry. So if you think that you may need to make a lot of adjustments on something, for whatever it is that you're doing, you think you're going to be making those adjustments frequently, then a better way to go, instead of just dragging and dropping your image like I did over here, in which case it's only referring to the image on this page, instead go over here to the File menu, come down to Place, and bring your image in using the Place command. There's the actual image right there. Choose Place. What this does is each time I resize this like that, instead of basing that resize on itself, it goes back to the original and adjusts that resize from the original image. So it always goes back to the original each time. So whenever you're resizing your image, you're only doing one resize. It just does it, there's one resize back to the original. Pull this out again, one resize from the original. So I don't lose any quality doing it as a placed image. There are other reasons to use or not use placed images. I've talked about that in other videos, but this is an important one here. If you want to keep as much quality as possible, place your images. So you can actually do two things. One is to change the size of your image first, if you know what size it's going to be going to. And then second, use the Place command to place that newly resized image into your final work project. And you're going to retain the highest amount of quality possible that Elements can do by doing this. And if you like this video, if you got something out of this video, consider sending me a thanks. Little thanks button right down there below the video. Just click on that and send me a little tip. That really does help out my channel quite a bit. And if you really want to learn all about how to use Photoshop Elements, the best way to do that is with my complete training course for Photoshop Elements. I have a version for each version of Photoshop Elements, and I'll put the links for those right down there in the description. Make sure you hit that subscribe button over there in HTG Photo. Make sure you take a look at that, and I'll see you next time.